I can get used to this.
Me too.
Experience more with a $100 credit at hundreds of hotels from Chase Sapphire Reserve. Chase, make more of what's yours.
I'm Mark Olson. I wrap up movies for the Los Angeles Times. Thank you for joining us today for one of our LA Times talks presented by Chase Sapphire at the Sundance Film Festival. And today we're so excited to be spotlighting the movie Young, Wild, Free, which is playing as part of the next section here at the festival. Thanks to all of you for being here. And Thembi, maybe for folks who haven't had a chance to see the movie yet, I didn't know.
It's Thembi.
Oh, sorry.
Thank you, Sanaa.
Pardon me. How would you describe the film for people?
It's a coming-of-age story centering two young black teenagers, which in and of itself is a huge thing. And I'd also say it's a story that centers around mental health and family. And it is set in Los Angeles. And there's a bit of a meet cute and romance involved.
And then what are some of the origins, kind of the origin of the story? I think it was your schoolmate, Joelle Taylor, that kind of first started the project?
Yeah, so I went to school with Joelle Taylor. We went to USC. And he actually wrote the script in class there. Wow. And then, like maybe a couple years after that, he, was still with him. And he felt like, he wanted to release it out into the world, but he didn't necessarily want to be the one to do it. He kind of wanted to let it go. And so he asked me if I'd be interested in directing it. And I said, sure. And he also was like, well, I think it needs a bit of rewriting, particularly because there's two really strong female characters. And obviously, I can only take them as far as I can take them. So I think you should look at them and make sure that they're authentic and put your female spin on them, and anything else you want to change in the story. And so I was really happy that he was so generous to hand it over to me and let me do whatever I wanted to with it.
I know, Algee, Sierra, the two of you just have such fantastic chemistry in the film. It's really exciting to see. And I wonder if you can talk a little bit about maybe the rehearsal process or kind of whatever the two of you did to sort of create that what we see on screen.
Sure. Good morning, y'all. How y'all doing? Hey, it's cold in here. I don't know when it's cold. Yeah, our rehearsal. Well, it was all three of our rehearsal process because Thembi was very, she was very hands-on with that and very adamant on us, with us on that. We spent a lot of time just going through the range of emotions that we would have to do on set. So when we got there, it wouldn't be so hard to kind of get in that mode. Obviously, it's different when you get on set from in the room, but we had like a toolbox to prepare. But me and Sierra talked a lot about the characters, talked a lot about what we could give to each other. And I feel like she was a really good teammate, for sure.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. Thembi comes from the theater world, so it was very refreshing to have 8 weeks of rehearsal and practice because there's been so many sets where I haven't had that opportunity. So it was a great way for us to just explore and have fun and do exercises, and it was literally the three of us in a room together just doing all these different things, trying different things. So by the time we got on set, we were just comfortable around each other and we didn't have any reservations, and we would just try and explore everything. So I think it worked.
And Sanaa, one of the things I appreciate so much about the movie is your character. You're playing the mother of Algee's character. It's a character that often could be sort of like underwritten and in some ways underdeveloped in the movie. And here she
played that version too, underwritten.
But here she just feels so full, and like it really feels like a really full character and a full person. And in part, it's because the movie gives this attention to her mental health struggles. And can you just talk a little bit about that? Like, what about the character appealed to you, and what made her maybe different from some of those other roles that you've had?
Yeah, I mean, I come from the theater as well, and I've obviously been in the business for 100 years. But what I have been craving lately is to go back to that time that is really playing characters. I'm an actor's actor from the get, and to step outside of my comfort zone and actually do something that is, now at this age, I'm finally starting to be able to do, just in terms of opportunities. It's a great time for Black people in Hollywood. I'm seeing it in real time as I was coming up. You know, I was often the only Black person on the set, or I knew the other 4 women working, and I rarely saw people of color behind the camera, and that reflected in the work. And so it's so refreshing to be here now. This Sundance, I think it's a record number of films of color and filmmakers of color. But I was very taken with the script, with the character, just selfishly as an actor, and then also wanting to support Thembi, and her vision.
And Thembi, can you talk a little bit about the depiction of Janus in the film?
Oh my goodness. So Janus, at the start was so complex and so layered. And when I first read the script, obviously, you always need to find your way into the story, into all of the characters. And there were bits of like my own relationship with my mom, my friends' relationships with their moms when they grew up. And so it was very easy for me to make her real and authentic because I was pulling from really close places. It was important for me, and that's why Sanaa was just so amazing, and we're so blessed to have her in this role because she, on the page, could easily be interpreted as like a very downtrodden, depressed woman where there's like no light, no joy, and like every time she's on screen is like, woe is me. And I totally didn't want that because I think the truth and the honesty of it is that even when you're struggling, if it's financially, emotionally, spiritually, what I know about Black people and Black women in particular is that that is not new to us, and so we push through it. And we find joy in the moments. It's like, okay, well, I ain't got no money, but I never have any money, so oh well, right? Like, I'm gonna figure it out. Like, so, there, and that's what I grew up with. And so there's always going to be laughter. There's always going to be joy. There's always going to be lightness. Like, yeah, this sucks, but we're gonna keep going, and find places and parts of our lives where we can still be happy, even with the problems that we have. And so every time I saw Sanaa like smiling, my editor and I were like, oh my gosh, she's so cute and pretty, and she makes us happy and makes us want to smile. And so I love that she got that.
And Algee, can you talk a little bit about, for your character, Brandon, his connection to his mother, Janus? Because I think their relationship in the film is really beautiful.
Yeah, I think, just like Thembi said, on the page, our relationship can look very much worse than it is. And I think I had a conversation with Thembi about that because I didn't want to feel like I hated her, because that's not what it is. It's a turbulent relationship, but there's still love and respect there because that's still my mom. And growing up in a Black household, you just don't play certain things. Like, we have a certain relationship where we talk to each other a certain way, but it's still, you can still tell the respect. There's a certain scene in the movie where I like kind of got up in her face and she came back at me. You can see me step back, and I like that happened because it's like there's still that respect that you need to have there. So I'm happy that that line was very we walked that very well.
And Sierra, in some ways, your character Cassidy is sort of an iteration of what people like to call the manic pixie dream girl. And I'm curious for you, you bring such energy to the performance. Can you talk a little bit about that? Like, just how you brought just so much energy to that role?
Yeah, it was definitely an introspective process. I definitely had to deep dive into parts of myself that weren't thoroughly explored, but luckily, I had so many inspiration from films and personal experiences. I had friends. I remember I had just told Thembi, I think a week prior, I went to New Orleans, and I had this friend, and she was like, it was literally an ambulance going down the road, and I saw it, and she just jumped on the back of it as the ambulance was going down the street. She was like, Sierra, come on, come on. And I was like, oh my God, you are Cassidy. And she was just so free and so wild. So things like that, people that I've met in my lifetime. And again, of course, I drew inspiration from other actresses and films that I felt were very inspirational. Love Girl Interrupted. It was just certain things that a certain energy that I knew I wanted to bring to the character, but I also wanted to make it my own. I wanted her to have, the poise and the attitude of Dorothy Dandridge, but I wanted her to have the wildness of Angelina, and I wanted her to just not be predictable. So I think that, hopefully we did a good job of making her very spontaneous and never knowing what she's gonna do next. So it was a very fun process, and Thembi was so encouraging, and she gave me references as well. So yeah, it was very fun.
Because Thembi, there are movie references sort of peppered all throughout the movie. I think one that's a favorite for people is when they're eating in a diner, and Cassidy points out, "Oh, this is the diner from Reservoir Dogs," and they kind of have a short conversation about that. First of all, is that the diner from Reservoir Dogs?
It absolutely is.
And then secondly, can you talk a bit about just having those movie references sort of threaded throughout, like where they come from? Are those your favorite movies? How do they reflect on the characters? Like, what do those references kind of mean to you?
So again, the foundation was there. Obviously, Joel is a movie buff because he's a filmmaker himself, right? And so he had already started it with that, and I loved it. And so I just continued with, peppering in movie references and giving them meaning. And obviously, all the movies that are referenced are films that he and I love. From Menace to Society, Boys in the Hood, to all of Quentin's stuff, and even criticizing Quentin, as I do in the film.
Can I just say a side note, because I thought it was such amazing synchronicity. I don't know if you all saw the movie yet, but the moment where Janus is sitting on the couch and he comes back home and the Wiz is on the TV. I didn't know that, when I sat there to shoot the scene, I was like, the Wiz, my mother was in the chorus of the Broadway show and the movie. So she was it was just such a surreal moment that here I am, acting in a movie, and, she's in the TV, you know what I mean? It was just crazy. It was sorry. Go ahead.
No, I'm glad you brought that up, because I always think about that. That was so amazing, and so great that we were able to kind of make that happen. But yeah, I think, again, what's normal for commercial and historical white films where white people are centered is not necessarily normal or cliche or overly done for us. So I, in particular, never really see black characters be so nerdy about films and have them portrayed in that way, and have them, say hey, I watch everything from Tyler Perry to Godard, and I can quote all those things, and I've got the posters on my wall. I don't see enough black characters being super enthusiastic about the arts in that way, and so I really thought that was cool to see from this girl.
Yeah, it was cool.
Algee, Sierra, did you get a screening list? Did you have movies you wanted to watch as you were working on the movie?
Yeah, I watched. I mean, we had a screening list from Thembi. I didn't watch all of them on there, to be honest.
I gave them so much homework. I was like, here's music, here's 20 movies, here's 20 books. And they were like, I'm not reading this shit.
Definitely. What did I watch? What was on the list?
We watched. We had lots of John Hughes on there.
Yeah.
Yeah. We had Fight Club on there. We had Girl Interrupted.
That was my main one. Fight Club was my main one that I watched. And I feel like when I was watching Fight Club and I was going back to our script, I'm like, this is so fire. How it's blending, you can just see the inspiration in certain places, but it's still ours and it's still fresh. So it was really dope.
My favorite was, I'm blanking on the title, Jim Carrey and Kate Winslet.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you guys. Thank you. Yes. Yes, I watched that at least 10 times. That was one of Thembi's references, and I was like, oh my goodness, this is phenomenal. She was like, I think this will also help you bring the character to life and give you some inspiration. And she had the blue hair, and she basically took him on a mental and physical ride throughout the whole film. So I really enjoyed that one, yes.
And then Thembi, the movie has such a beautiful portrait of Los Angeles. We see parts of LA, both South LA that we don't see on film very often, but then we also see these two characters experiencing other parts of LA, like the Hollywood Hills, and that we don't often get to see black characters, in those parts of Los Angeles. Was that important to you that we have this kind of really full portrait of the city through their eyes?
Absolutely. I think I was telling you yesterday. So I grew up in Harlem, in the projects, and similarly to people who grow up in like Compton or South Central, people and kids in those neighborhoods, there's so many of them that will be like, I've never gone to a Broadway play before. I've never gone to the beach before. I've never gone outside my neighborhood. And so my mom was really big on that. Like, I loved Harlem, obviously, and it was an amazing and beautiful place to explore and grow up. But we went to other parts of Manhattan and Brooklyn, and I got to experience culture from that perspective. And I think that's so important because even cinematically, when a film takes place in South LA or a black neighborhood like Chicago, like South Side of Chicago, those black characters stay there, right? And the freedom and the ability and allowance for them to go outside of their neighborhoods and experience the same things that their white peers and counterparts experience doesn't happen. So it's weird when you see black people, in the Hollywood Hills or whatever, and it's just like, oh, they can go there? Yes, they can go there, And so that was important for me to show.
And Sierra, it looks like it's just that you drive this little car in the movie, this little red BMW convertible that just looks like a super fun car to buzz around town in.
It was not.
Tell me about it.
Problematic.
We had to have two cars. They all broke down. Sometimes they were being pushed in the scene. It was like in action, and then we just push them and be like, act like you're driving. And those cars were so insane, but there's a romanticism about them, and I love the vintage aspect about them. I love that it's a character in the film, but yes, it was difficult dealing with those cars.
I just want to say, because I was proud about this, I did not drive us off a cliff. That is actually me driving.
I'm proud about that
to
too.
The side. When we pull up to the view of the city, that is actually me driving up to the side, and excuse me, Thembi's like, Sierra, don't go off the cliff. I'm like, Thembi, I know how to drive. So yeah, that was fun.
And now the movie is called Young, Wild, Free, and I think the style of the movie is also very young, wild, and free. Thembi, can you talk a little bit just about what you liked about having this really free visual style in the movie?
It's actually not free. It's actually, I think, in my perspective, when you're attempting to do something very stylish and you're moving the camera all the time, it's actually the opposite of free. It feels free when you watch it, but in practice and execution, it's very hard. It's very hard to piece those shots together with the limited amount of time you have and the things you discover as you're moving the camera, what you see, what you don't want to see, the shakiness of it, because we didn't have a lot of money for lots of toys, and then you're bringing the actors and they're having to choreograph with it. So I think to establish that, it actually takes a lot of work and time.
And Sanaa, there's a couple scenes that you have with Algee where the movie has this kind of frenetic feel to it, and then it really pauses and sort of breathes for a moment. The two of you, there's I think two scenes where you're just sitting on the front porch and talking. And can you talk a little bit about those scenes in particular, and what for you it meant to have these sort of more calm, sort of introspective scenes in the middle of all this other action?
That's what drew me to the character, is that she's not a stereotype. She's not a caricature. She's a layered, complicated woman. And she has issues, and she's not always the greatest mother, but she loves her son, and she loves her children, and she's doing the best she can. And she feels guilty. It's a familiar relationship to me, just from my own life. Where sometimes the roles of parent and child are reversed. And they seem to have that, and I love those quiet scenes. I loved how you shot them. The first one where it starts in a wide and it just slowly, there's no coverage, it's beautiful. And it's just the time for you to really get to see the complexity of their relationship and their love.
And Algee, can you talk about those scenes? Like, what were those like for you?
I felt like I was talking to my mama for real. There's a warm energy, and there's obviously like she said, there's a familiar energy. But those scenes were very important for me as well because, like I said, I didn't want it to seem like we hated each other in the movie. So those scenes were very crucial to me to establish that, to show that warmth, and show that care that we have for each other. And it's like the only reason our relationship is so turbulent is because we both care, and so we're trying to figure that out. And when you're trying to figure out when you care so much, it's not gonna be perfect all the time. So I was very happy about those parts.
And I want to be sure to ask as well just about the character played by Mike Epps in the film, and that I appreciate so much that, like, he seems like a little sketchy, but then also he's actually not 100% a bad guy. Like, it's funny where, like, I think there's a lot of different directions you could go with that character, and he comes out being much more complex than he might have been. Thembi, do you want to?
This is what happens when you have a female behind the camera. You know what I mean? You get all of those. That's why it's so important. You're seeing different, right? You're seeing different perspectives, and you're seeing the depth of something. Anyway.
Yeah. So again, and with Sanaa and making sure that we cast someone who totally understood how to play levity and levels. That was important to me for our big bad, our villain. I didn't want to cast like some brooding 6'5", 300-pound person who's just gonna mean mug and be really intimidating. To me, the best villains are people that you almost root for, that you like, that you're like, oh, I know he's such an asshole, but I like him. I think that's what you want the audience to feel, that tug and that push and pull. And so I was like, hey, we need to get a comedian. We need to get someone who is charming, that people like. And I think once you have somebody with that foundation, it just adds so much, And then also, again, pulling from your own life. I had a dad who was, super flawed, but also was so charming and so likable. And so, my relationship with him is like, hey, like these areas of him really suck, but then these areas of him are like so amazing. And I think that's everyone in their appearance. And so I loved that Mike was able to understand that.
And so now, what were those scenes like for you working with Mike?
I had like one scene. Remember?
Yeah.
First of all, I go way back with Mike, and it was very surreal as well because I just did my, we talked on the come up. Mike was in it, and so was Gata.
I know.
It's so weird. Gata played the clerk in the grocery store, but Mike and I've known Mike for like 30 years, so we were tickled, when we found out we were doing that. He was
Mike
my baby
has so
daddy.
much. And he's so sensitive because, we were walking through it and I was like, okay, Mike, you're gonna like steal her medicine. He was like, oh no, people are gonna hate me. And
And Sierra, one thing I have to be sure to ask about is simply your costumes in the film. I mean, they are so fantastic from Nisha Lamel?
Nisha,
pardon me. Can you talk about those costumes? Like, what was it like for you when they just showed you, like, this is what you're wearing today? Like, what was it? How exciting were those outfits for you?
Oh, it was amazing. I got to play dress up every day. Every day felt like Halloween, but I was just playing one character, but it almost felt as if I was showing a different aspect of the character through each outfit that I wore in a scene. So I had the funnest time playing her, and it was such an escapism for me, and I was able to just be free and whatever, you not have to think about what I'm wearing or what I look like because she doesn't care. That doesn't matter to her. So that's definitely something that I took from the film into now. So that inspired the fur coat because I probably would not have wanted to wear this, but I was like, I just enjoyed it, and it was definitely the funnest experience for me and the funnest character that I've played thus far.
And Thembi, was it important to you to have some fun with those costumes?
But look at her.
Yeah.
Look at her.
Do you see me? Oh my God. Like, I mean, it's funny, we were interviewing costume designers and they would, come with boards and I would be bored. And, sometimes their take, you're just quiet. You're like, what do you think? Before I start going in. And I remember this one person, she was just like, so I think, it's all about the performance. So the clothing, should not be a big part of it. And, and she's just basically showing me like Gap, neutrals and stuff. And I was like, oh my God, next, and Nisha, she instantly got it. And, her ideas were so amazing, and we got each other. And Nisha, she comes from a styling background and a fashion background. A lot of the costume designers I work on all of my projects, coincidentally, they all come from, that Devil Wears Prada world, where they've like worked at a magazine, and they've worked in fashion and editorial, and they've like done that whole thing. And so bringing it in over to here, they just have like such a keen sense and eye. And so I just tend to work with people who come from that world, and who want to take chances.
And then Algee, I think if I was reading the credits correctly, you have a song in the movie as well?
Yeah, I got two songs in there. Yeah, yeah, it's crazy. Yeah, so I do music as well. But the trajectory of my career, that's where I see myself. I see myself doing both at a very high level. So the fact that I have a freaking film premiering at Sundance with 2 songs in them is wild right now.
But now you had mentioned to me that it was a little bit of a shock for you watching the movie because you didn't actually know where the songs would be.
She wouldn't tell me nothing. She wouldn't tell me anything. I didn't know where they was going to be. So when I saw the placement of them, it just like it made sense and it fit with what was going on. That was really dope to see.
Thembi, can you talk about that? Like figuring out where to put those songs?
Yeah, music is huge for me and my editor too, and so that's why we, click so well. We have the same like love and sense of music and cinematically where it goes and how it aids our story, and so I was, like Algee was like, hey, I want to have a song in the movie. I was like, cool, yeah, let's do it, right? And so I was like, oh shit, but I gotta like the music. I gotta listen to it and hope it works out. And so he sent me like a bunch of songs, and there's so much trust between Lindsay and I, and so she knows me so well. So sometimes, if I was like busy doing something else, I like just send her some songs, and then she'll be like, hey, I cut these songs in. What do you think? I think you would like these, and these are ones I like. 'Cause she knows there are some differences. And she'll be like, I'm fighting for this song, but I know you're going to like this one. And so we just have that relationship. But I think in his case, with his music, I knew the songs that I liked, and then I was like, I don't know where they would go, though, but I like these songs. And then I just said, try it in these places, and they worked. Mm-hmm.
And then, Sanaa, as you mentioned, you recently directed your own first film, On the Come Up, and I'm wondering what it's like for you to be working with kind of emerging filmmakers like Thembi, and what that sort of means to you.
Well, it's just, I feel like it's part of at this stage, all of a sudden you're shifting, thinking about the second half of your life. And like what I want to do. And a big passion of mine is uplifting other females, Black artists. And for me, working with her was great. She was extremely nurturing. She was calm. I know what it means to have to make your day. And I know the budget, and I know that it was like behind that calm demeanor. She never let it show, and we were able to just really do our work. For me, it was a treat for me to just come on set after having been in that seat and just kind of like sink myself into this character.
And we have time for some questions from the audience. Thembi, I'm just going to ask you one more question. Was at the premiere yesterday, you mentioned how the film is 100% Black financed. And can you talk a little bit about that and the kind of making that happen?
I'm so proud about that. That's so important and special. And I'm just so glad that we could say that. So Macro that company is the original financiers. Charles King was very happy to get on board, and so we were so happy about that. And we actually did have another co-financier, and they just didn't seem to be a great fit, and there were just so many issues that we were trying to like face, not only with like cast scheduling and doing all those things, but then also having the same goals and priorities and visions. And so when that financier went away, James Lopez at Macro reached out to Tommy Oliver. And it's so funny because Tommy and his wife are longtime friends of mine. And it was a surprise to me that, he had reached out to them and they came on board, because I was like, oh my gosh, I was just at Tommy's house yesterday or whatever, I'm like so close with them, and it made it even more special that it could be with friends. And on top of that, Tommy is a filmmaker himself. And so when he was on set, he was also just a great person to have on my side to help, to problem solve, to be like a second set of eyes and ears. So I got like a lot from the relationships, with my producers, which I'm like really grateful for. And I think we need to have more films that are solely Black produced and created, because I think it says something to people.
And so we have a few minutes. I think we have some microphones in the audience if anyone has any questions. Anybody?
Don't all go at one time, y'all. Jeez Louise.
I'm really nervous. Sorry. I didn't get to see the movie yet, but I'm super excited about it. I'm just excited about the fact to be able to watch a movie that's a Black film that touches upon mental illness, because we also don't see that enough. There's a lot of movies where white people have mental illness, and my father suffered from mental illness. He took his own life, and it's so stigmatized in the Black community still. And, I got my master's in counseling. Couldn't afford to finish it, but there's not enough Black therapists, because people want to go to people who understand the struggles. So it's nice that I'm excited to see a film that touches upon that, so people can see that, there are other people who are struggling like them that look like them.
And that's the importance of images. When we see something reflected, it makes it okay. Yeah. And so the thing I love about this movie is that it's mental illness is weaved within it. It's not, a preaching story about mental illness. It is kind of just laid into the story, like it's laid into your life, And so when people can see, that looks like me, and my mom went through this, I recognize this, maybe I don't have as much shame. Maybe, because Janus does get, not spoiler, but like Janus does get back, in therapy at a point. And, that is so important. Being reflected is so important. And so I'm glad you brought that up.
I guess that wasn't a question, but what inspired you to weave that into, like what made you, bring mental illness in it and touch upon that?
Yeah, the original script, again, it didn't necessarily have that layer in there, but when I read it, my takeaway was the struggles and issues that Brandon was having a mental toll on him. It was having like a spiritual, emotional, mental, taking the toll on him. And so, this was years ago. I think we're even now more have like evolved into a real conversation about it even more. But there was like a beginning, strokes of those conversations within certain communities, within the larger Black community. And so I just thought it would be interesting because, again, so I was, raised in the projects, and like the projects is like a prime breeding ground for mental illness. Like it totally is. That's not a normal place to grow up. It's not a healthy place to grow up. And when you're in that environment, as a kid, as a teenager, because it's your norm, you just think like, oh, it's normal that everyone's walking around angry. It's normal that everyone's walking around frustrated because that's just what it is. But it's only when you grow up and you become an adult, you see how other people live, and you see how other people like talk to themselves and each other like, oh, you're tired, you should get some rest, right? Like no one says that in the hood. Like when somebody's tired, they'll be like, oh, fucking well, like
there's no
self-care. No one cares about you in that way. No one talks to you in that way. No one encourages you to talk to yourself in that way. And so it was a realization for me. And at that time, I was truly realizing that. And I said, I think we should put this, I think this is a great story to talk about those things.
And I think we have time for another. We have towards the back here.
Sure. I think everyone on stage mentioned the script and trying to, dive deeper and really find the layers of the interpersonal relationships and each character themselves. Sounds like there was a lot of rehearsal that went into that, and a lot of deeper conversations, just kind of trying to suss that out. But I'm also curious about the role of casting in that and how you went about finding not just such a talented cast, but people that are willing to do that work and really understand the story and deep dive into how all of that kind of fit together.
Yeah, I think at the outset it was pretty much a traditional casting experience in the beginning where you're just like thinking of people and seeing if they would be willing to like come in an audition or put themselves on tape. And I think I remember in the beginning of our casting process, I think Algee was like, because he's always booked and busy. So I think he was actually working on a macro film. So I mentioned him. I was like, oh, what about Algee Smith? And I think he was busy. And so I was like, oh, okay. And so, you find yourself like 3 months later, like, hey, we're still trying to do this. So, and then someone was like, hey, I think he's available. And I was like, okay, cool. Like, let's see if he's interested. And so that's how that came about. And it was very obvious to all of us. As soon as we saw his reading, his audition, we were like, that's it. That's him. Because it's a fine line with Brandon. This is a leading man role. So, I auditioned a lot of really great actors that to me it was like, in my opinion, are like, okay, that's a number 2 on the call sheet. Or that's not a person that I feel like leads a movie, from like energy and look and it's just a thing. It's something you can't explain. But so you have to have that, but then there's so much like vulnerability and you have to kind of feel for this character because, we audition like some people and it's like, I don't believe that person's in trouble at all. You know what I mean? Like there's no vulnerability there. Like he could do anything, like you don't see that. And so it was really difficult. And so, it was very obvious for Algee. And then I remember Sierra came in with purple hair. And we were like, oh, my gosh. And her audition was, like, so great, and we all loved it. So, yeah. And, I mean, you just write I wrote so many letters when it came to the scenario because, I mean, I don't know.
I don't think I was the first choice.
No. Well,
it's okay. You know what? It happens. This is this industry, sometimes. But the role was mine. There's been roles.
Absolutely
right,
yours.
You know what I mean? But, yeah.
Well, we started shooting really early, and people like Sanaa are not available all the time. But also, I don't know if anybody knows about the indie process of casting film, but when you're trying to cast someone like Sanaa, you have to write a letter, and I've like done this all my life. You like write a letter to the person, and you're like, "Oh my God, you're so great. I love you." So
I've written those letters, and when I get them, I'm like, "You don't know my work."
So yeah, it was a wild process. I'll say that.
And then we had time. I think we had one more question. Oh, over there. Okay.
I have a question I'd like to ask directors. Actually, is planning so much for all these roles. There's always that one moment in the film that we got a movie moment. Do you remember that moment in the film when you got done with it? And you're like, we got a movie.
No. I mean. I always play cool on the outside, but on the inside, everything I shoot is like, oof, hope that works, and not like because of them or anything, just like, did I fuck it up? Like, did I cover it correctly? Did I direct them well? Is the lighting working? Like, I have Tommy will tell you, I have so much angst and like, I just tightly wound. So I'm, it's very hard for me to, feel good.
And I think that's where we're going to wrap things up. But let me be one of the first people. Let me put that angst to rest for you. That I think the movies turned out wonderfully. And please, everyone, join me in thanking the creative team from Young Wild Free.
Thank you guys.
Thank you guys so much.
Thank you.
This was so much fun. Thank you.
Thank you.